The morning sun rises over London, casting long shadows across the famous black gates of Buckingham Palace. Behind those gates stands one of the most recognizable sights in the world, the Queen's Guard in their bright red uniforms and tall black hats. Today, like every other day, these soldiers will stand perfectly still for hours. They won't speak. They won't smile. They won't even blink unless they absolutely have to. To the thousands of tourists who visit each day, they might seem like statues dressed in military clothing, but they're not statues. They're real people with real hearts beating beneath those red jackets. Meet Tom, a 25-year-old soldier from Yorkshire. He's been a guardsman for 3 years now, and today he's taking his position outside the palace. As he marches to his spot, his heavy boots click against the stone ground in perfect rhythm. Tom remembers his first day of training. The drill sergeant made it very clear. Being a Queen's Guard isn't just about looking good for pictures. It's about honor, discipline, and protecting something bigger than yourself. These soldiers don't just guard a building. They guard centuries of tradition and history. The training was tough. Months of learning to stand perfectly still, no matter what happens around you. Rain, snow, heat, nothing should make you move. Tourists might try to make you laugh. Children might cry. People might even touch you. But a real guardsman stays focused on his duty. As Tom takes his position, the first tourists of the day start arriving. Families with cameras, tour groups with guides, and people from all over the world who've traveled thousands of miles just to see these famous soldiers. A tour guide points at Tom and explains to her group. These guards are highly trained soldiers from the British Army. They've served in places like Afghanistan and Iraq. Some have saved lives in dangerous missions, but here their job is to stay completely still and show respect for the crown. Tom stands straight, his rifle held firmly by his side. His bearskin hat weighs about 2 pounds, and in the summer heat it can feel much heavier. His red uniform is made of thick wool that was designed for cold weather, not for standing in the London sun. But Tom doesn't complain. None of them do. They understand that this job is about more than personal comfort. When children see them, they see heroes from storybooks. When veterans pass by, they see fellow soldiers. When tourists take pictures, they're capturing a piece of British history. The morning crowd grows bigger. School children press their faces against the railings, trying to get the guards to react. Their teachers whisper, "Don't get too close." These are real soldiers doing an important job. Tom can hear everything. He hears the excited whispers, the clicking cameras, the questions people ask about him and his fellow guards, but his face shows nothing. His eyes stare straight ahead, focused on a point in the distance. A young boy tugs on his mother's sleeve. "Mummy, why doesn't he move?" His mother kneels down and explains, "He's protecting the Queen's home, sweetheart. That's a very important job that requires him to be very serious and focused." The boy nods, still staring at Tom with wide, curious eyes. What the tourists don't see is the man behind the uniform. Tom thinks about his family back home. He remembers his grandmother, who was so proud when he joined the Guard. She used to tell him stories about her father, who served in World War II. "Service runs in our family," she would say. The sun climbs higher and the day gets warmer. Tom's uniform starts to feel heavy, but he doesn't show it. This is what he trained for. This is what it means to be a guardsman. Around noon, something different happens. The crowd starts to quiet down. People begin pointing and whispering more excitedly. Tom knows what this means. Someone important is arriving, maybe a member of the royal family, or a world leader visiting the palace. Even during these special moments, the guards must remain perfectly still. They are the constant, unchanging presence that represents stability and tradition. While the world around them changes, they remain steady. As the afternoon continues, Tom notices different types of visitors. Some take quick photos and move on. Others stand quietly, seeming to understand the deeper meaning of what they're seeing. A few veterans stop and stand at attention for a moment, showing their respect for fellow soldiers. These are the moments that remind Tom why he chose this path. It's not just about standing still or looking impressive in photos. It's about being part of something that connects the past to the present. Every guardsman who has stood in this spot carried the same responsibility, the same pride, and the same commitment to serving something greater than himself. The day is long, but Tom knows that behind his silent, serious face, he carries the hopes and respect of everyone who looks at him. Children see bravery, adults see dedication, veterans see brotherhood. As the sun begins to set, painting the sky orange and pink above Buckingham Palace, Tom prepares for the end of his shift. Soon another guardsman will take his place and the cycle will continue, just as it has for generations. But today was different. Today, Tom learned that sometimes the most powerful thing a soldier can do isn't fighting or marching. Sometimes it's simply standing still and letting others see what honor looks like. Tomorrow he'll put on that red uniform again. He'll place that heavy bearskin hat on his head. He'll march to his position and stand perfectly still for hours. Because that's what it means to be one of the Queen's Guard. The tourists will come and go.
The cameras will flash.
The children will point and wonder. And through it all, soldiers like Tom will stand ready to show the world what it means to serve with pride, discipline, and unwavering dedication. It's Tuesday morning, and the autumn air has a crisp bite to it. The leaves on the trees around Buckingham Palace are turning golden brown, and there's something magical about London during this time of year. Standing at his post, Richard feels the cool breeze against his face. He's been a guardsman for 2 years now, and he knows this job inside and out. Stand straight, look ahead, don't react to anything around you. These are the rules that every guard lives by. But today, something special is about to happen. An older woman walks slowly toward the palace gates, holding the hand of a little girl. The woman moves carefully, using a walking stick to help her balance. But the little girl bounces with excitement, her eyes wide with wonder as she sees the famous Red Guards for the first time. The little girl has traveled a very long way for this moment. She lives in a small town in Wales with her grandmother, and for months she's been reading books about the Queen's soldiers. Every night before bed, her grandmother reads her stories about brave knights and royal protectors. "Are those the red soldiers from my books, Grandma?" The little girl whispers, her voice filled with amazement. Her grandmother smiles. "Yes, sweetheart. Those are the Queen's Guard. They're real soldiers who protect the palace." The little girl has something that makes her extra special. She sees the world differently than most people, with a heart full of pure joy and wonder. Her grandmother brought her here because she knows how much these soldiers mean to her granddaughter. As they get closer to the gates, the little girl's excitement grows. She's wearing her best dress, a blue one with little flowers on it, and she's been practicing her best wave all morning. Richard notices them approaching. Though his training tells him to keep looking straight ahead, he can see the little girl's bright smile from the corner of his eye. She's pointing at him and the other guards, bouncing on her toes with excitement. "Look, Grandma, they're so tall, and their hats are so big," the little girl says, not bothering to whisper anymore. Her voice carries that special kind of happiness that only children have. The grandmother gently reminds her, "Remember what we talked about, dear. The soldiers can't talk while they're working, but they can see you and they know you're here to visit them." But the little girl is too excited to stay quiet. She walks right up to the gate, presses her face between the bars, and calls out in her sweet voice, "Hello, soldier. I came all the way from Wales to see you." Richard's heart skips a beat. In all his training, no one prepared him for this moment. He can feel the little girl's pure joy, and it touches something deep inside him. Her grandmother stands behind her, tears forming in her eyes as she watches her granddaughter's dream come true. "I have a book about you at home," the little girl continues, waving with both hands. "You're so brave. I want to be brave like you when I grow up." Other tourists start to notice what's happening. They pull out their cameras, but not in a pushy way. Even they can feel that this is a special moment. A few people smile, and some grandparents in the crowd remember bringing their own grandchildren here for the first time. Richard faces an impossible choice. Every rule he's learned says he must stay perfectly still. He cannot acknowledge the crowd. He cannot break character. But this little girl's happiness is so genuine, so pure, that it's breaking through every barrier he's built. The grandmother kneels down next to her granddaughter. "Maybe the soldier can hear you, sweetheart. Why don't you tell him about your book?" The little girl nods seriously and looks directly at Richard. "My book says you protect the Queen and keep everyone safe. That's the most important job in the whole world. You must be very special to do such an important job." Richard feels his chest tighten with emotion. This child understands something that many adults miss. She sees past the uniform and the ceremony to the real meaning of what he does. The little girl takes a step back and does something that surprises everyone. She stands up as straight as she can, puts her hand over her heart, and gives Richard the most serious, respectful salute a 7-year-old can manage. "Thank you for keeping us safe." Mr. Soldier, she says solemnly. That's the moment when something inside Richard breaks. Not in a bad way, but in a way that lets his humanity shine through. Every instinct tells him to stay still, but his heart tells him something different. Very slowly, very carefully, Richard shifts his weight just slightly. It's the smallest movement possible, but it's enough. He tilts his head down just a tiny bit, barely noticeable to most people, but clear enough for a little girl who's watching him with complete attention. And then, for just 1 second, Richard allows the corner of his mouth to lift in the smallest smile. The little girl sees it immediately. Her face lights up like Christmas morning, and she starts jumping up and down with joy. "Grandma, Grandma!" He smiled at me. The soldier smiled at me. Her grandmother is crying now, but they're happy tears. She's watched her granddaughter face many challenges in her young life, and seeing her experience this moment of pure joy is worth more than anything in the world. He did, sweetheart. He really did. That means he's happy to meet you. Other people in the crowd are smiling too. They've just witnessed something beautiful, a moment when duty and compassion met and compassion won. The little girl waves goodbye, still bouncing with excitement. "Goodbye, Mr. Soldier. I'll never forget you. I'll tell everyone about how brave and nice you are." As they walk away, Richard can hear the grandmother explaining, "That was very special, dear. That soldier broke the rules just a little bit to make you happy. That shows what a good heart he has." Richard returns to his perfect stance, but inside he's changed. He's learned that sometimes the most important part of being a soldier isn't following every rule perfectly. Sometimes it's knowing when a small act of kindness matters more than strict protocol. The rest of his shift feels different. Every time he sees a child in the crowd, he remembers the little girl from Wales and her pure joy. He realizes that his job isn't just about protecting a building or following orders. It's about representing something good and hopeful in the world. Years later, Richard will still remember this day. He'll remember a little girl who traveled hundreds of miles just to see him, who understood the importance of his job better than most adults, and who taught him that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is show your heart. The afternoon sun hangs low in the London sky, casting long shadows across the courtyard of Buckingham Palace. It's been a busy day for the guards, with tour groups coming and going, children taking pictures, and the usual crowd of curious visitors from around the world. Standing at his post near the main gate, Kevin keeps his eyes focused straight ahead. He's 26 years old and has been serving as a Queen's Guard for 18 months. Before this, he served 2 tours overseas, and he knows what it means to be a soldier in dangerous places. But today, something different is about to happen. Something that will remind him why he chose to serve his country. A black taxi pulls up to the curb and the driver gets out to help someone in the back seat. Kevin can see from the corner of his eye that it's an elderly man in a wheelchair. The taxi driver is being very gentle and patient, carefully helping the man get situated in his chair. The elderly man is wearing a dark blue blazer with military medals pinned to the chest. Even from a distance, Kevin can tell this is a veteran. The way he sits in his wheelchair, the pride in his posture despite his age, everything about him speaks of a lifetime of service. The man's name is Albert, though Kevin doesn't know this yet. Albert is 91 years old, and this is likely his last visit to Buckingham Palace. His health isn't what it used to be, and traveling from his care home in Birmingham was difficult. But he had to make this trip one more time. Albert fought in World War II. He was just 18 when he landed on the beaches of Normandy, scared and far from home, but determined to do his duty. He saw things that no young man should ever have to see. He lost friends who never made it home, but he survived, and he's carried their memory with him for over 70 years. A younger man, probably Albert's grandson, pushes the wheelchair slowly toward the palace gates. Albert's hands rest on his lap, but Kevin notices something important. The old man is wearing white gloves, the kind that soldiers wear during ceremonies. "Take me closer to the gates, David," Albert says to his grandson. His voice is quiet but clear. "I want to pay my respects properly." David, the grandson, doesn't fully understand what this visit means to his grandfather. To him, Albert is just the sweet old man who tells stories about the war and always remembers everyone's birthday. But Albert's military service ended before David was born, and it's hard for younger generations to imagine what these old soldiers went through. As they get closer to the gates, Albert asks David to stop the wheelchair. They're about 15 feet away from where Kevin is standing, close enough for Albert to see the guard clearly, but respectful of the boundaries that protect the palace. Albert sits quietly for a moment, looking at Kevin and the other guards. In his mind, he's not seeing young men in ceremonial uniforms. He's seeing the spirit of every soldier who ever wore a British uniform. He's remembering his fallen comrades, his brothers in arms who never got to grow old, never got to see their grandchildren, never got to visit palaces in peacetime. Slowly, with great effort, Albert begins to raise his right hand. His arthritis makes every movement painful. But this is something he needs to do. His hand shakes as he lifts it, but his determination is strong. David notices what his grandfather is doing and starts to say, "Grandpa, you don't need to." But Albert stops him with a look. "Yes, I do, son. I absolutely do." Albert's hand finally reaches the proper position for a military salute. It's not perfect. His arthritis won't allow that. His hand trembles and the angle isn't quite right. But the respect and honor behind it are unmistakable. Kevin sees this happening and his heart starts to race. Here's a man who probably fought for the freedom that Kevin now protects. A man who faced real danger, real bullets, real death so that future generations could live in peace. In Kevin's training, they never covered this exact situation. What do you do when a war hero salutes you? When someone who served his country in the most dangerous circumstances shows you this level of respect? The proper protocol is clear. Kevin should remain motionless, looking straight ahead, acknowledging nothing. But sometimes protocol doesn't account for the human heart. Albert holds his salute for a full 30 seconds, his hand shaking with the effort. Other people in the area start to notice what's happening. The usual chatter of tourists dies down as they realize they're witnessing something important. Kevin makes a decision that could get him in serious trouble. Very slowly, very carefully, he brings his right hand up in a perfect military salute, returning Albert's gesture with the precision and respect that 7 decades of service deserves. The moment their salutes meet, something magical happens. It's as if decades of military history connect in that single gesture. The young soldier acknowledging the old soldier, the protected honoring the protector, the present respecting the past. Albert's eyes fill with tears, but he holds his salute steady. For just a moment, he's not a frail man in a wheelchair. He's a soldier again, standing with his brothers, being honored for his service. Other people in the crowd begin to understand what they're seeing. A few other veterans in the area stand at attention. Some people take off their hats. Children stop talking and look on with wide eyes, sensing that something important is happening even if they don't fully understand what. After what feels like both an eternity and an instant, Albert slowly lowers his hand. Kevin does the same, returning to his regulation position. But both men are changed by this moment. David, the grandson, is crying now. He's never seen his grandfather look so proud, so honored. "Thank you," he whispers to Kevin, even though he knows the guard can't respond. Albert sits in his wheelchair for a few more minutes, just looking at the palace and the guards. He's thinking about all the soldiers who came before, all the soldiers who will come after, and the unbroken chain of service that connects them all. "I'm ready to go now," Albert finally tells his grandson. As David pushes the wheelchair back toward the taxi, Albert turns around one more time. He nods slightly toward Kevin. Not a salute this time, just a nod between soldiers who understand each other. Kevin watches them leave, feeling more proud of his uniform than he ever has before. He realizes that his job isn't just about ceremony or tradition. It's about carrying forward the sacrifice and dedication of men like Albert, who gave everything so that peace could exist. For the rest of his shift, Kevin stands a little taller. Every time he sees his reflection in the palace windows, he remembers the old soldier who honored him with a salute. He thinks about the responsibility he carries, not just to protect a building, but to represent every soldier who ever served. That evening, when Kevin goes home and takes off his uniform, he calls his own grandfather, who served in the Korean War. They talk for an hour about service, sacrifice, and the bonds between soldiers that time can never break. And somewhere in Birmingham, Albert sits in his room at the care home, looking at old photographs of his war buddies. But today, for the first time in years, he's smiling, because today he felt like a soldier again. Tuesday morning brings gray clouds and light rain to London, the kind of weather that makes everything look softer, quieter, and somehow more thoughtful. At Buckingham Palace, the guards take their positions despite the drizzle. Their red uniforms protected by their training to stand strong in any weather. Standing near the central gate, Daniel adjusts his grip on his rifle and settles into the familiar routine of his watch. He's been a guardsman for 4 years now, and he's learned to find peace in the rhythm of his duty. Rain or shine, crowds or quiet, his job remains the same. But this morning feels different. Maybe it's the weather, or maybe it's the way the light falls through the clouds. But Daniel senses that today will bring something unexpected. Around 10 o'clock, through the gentle rain, Daniel notices a woman walking slowly toward the palace. She's by herself, which isn't unusual. But something about the way she moves catches his attention. She's not walking like a tourist eager to take pictures. She's walking like someone carrying a heavy weight. The woman's name is Helen, though Daniel doesn't know this yet. She's 52 years old, and she's made this journey from Manchester for a very specific reason. In her hands, she carries a small photograph protected by a clear plastic cover from the rain. Helen stops about 20 feet from the gate and just stands there. She doesn't pull out a camera or call to the guards like most visitors do. She simply stands in the rain looking at Daniel and his fellow guards with an expression of deep sadness, mixed with something else. Respect, maybe, or understanding. Daniel can see the photograph in her hands, but he can't make out the details from his position. What he can see is that this woman is struggling with something profound. Her shoulders shake slightly, and it's not from the cold rain. Helen is thinking about her husband, Michael. They were married for 28 years, and for 15 of those years, Michael served as a Queen's Guard. He stood in the exact same spot where Daniel now stands. He wore the same red uniform, carried the same rifle, and felt the same pride in serving his country. Michael died 6 months ago. Not in combat, not in some heroic moment, but from cancer, a quiet, cruel disease that took him slowly, despite all his strength and bravery. Helen was with him at the end, holding his hand as he whispered stories about his time at the palace. "I wish you could see them, Helen," Michael had said in his final weeks. "The way the tourists look at us with such respect, the children who wave, the veterans who understand, it made every difficult day worth it." Now Helen is here fulfilling a promise she made to herself. She wanted to stand where Michael stood, to see what he saw, to feel connected to the part of his life that meant so much to him. The rain is getting a bit heavier, but Helen doesn't seem to notice. She pulls out the photograph and holds it up slightly, as if she's showing it to the guards. Daniel can see now that it's a military photo. A young man in a dress uniform smiling proudly at the camera. Daniel's heart begins to race. Something about that photograph, about the way the woman is holding it, tells him this isn't just any military picture. This is personal. This is important. Helen starts to speak quietly at first, as if she's talking to herself, but her voice carries enough for Daniel to hear some of her words. He loved this job so much, she says to no one in particular. Even on the hardest days when his feet hurt or the weather was terrible, he would come home and tell me stories about the people he met. He said standing here made him feel like he was part of something bigger than himself. Daniel recognizes the uniform in the photograph now. It's the same one he's wearing. The same one worn by generations of Queen's Guards. This woman is holding a picture of a fellow guardsman. He wanted to be buried in his dress uniform, Helen continues, her voice getting stronger. He said it was the proudest thing he ever wore, except for his wedding ring. She touches her own wedding ring as she says this, turning it slowly around her finger. Other people in the area begin to notice what's happening. A few tourists lower their cameras, sensing that this is not a moment for pictures. An elderly couple stands quietly nearby, and the woman gently takes her husband's arm, understanding that they're witnessing something sacred. Helen looks directly at Daniel now. Through the rain, their eyes meet for just a moment. In that look, Daniel sees everything: love, loss, pride, and grief all mixed together. He used to tell me about moments like this, Helen says, though she's not sure if Daniel can hear her. When someone would come to the palace not as a tourist but as family. When someone would understand what this uniform really means. Daniel's training tells him to look away, to stay focused on his duty. But his heart tells him something different. This woman isn't just any visitor. She's the widow of a brother soldier, someone who shared the same commitment, the same pride, the same service. In a moment that surprises even him, Daniel does something that could end his career. He shifts his position slightly, turns his head just enough to look directly at Helen and places his gloved hand over his heart. It's a small gesture, barely noticeable to most people. But to Helen it means everything. It's a soldier acknowledging another soldier's family. It's recognition of her loss and respect for her husband's service. Helen's composure finally breaks. She starts to cry, but they're not just tears of sadness. They're tears of gratitude, of feeling understood, of knowing that Michael's service mattered to the people who came after him. "Thank you," she whispers, barely audible over the rain. He would have been so proud to know that his brothers remember him. Daniel holds the gesture for a few more seconds, then slowly returns to his regulation position. But something has changed in both of them. Helen feels a weight lifting from her shoulders, while Daniel feels the full responsibility of carrying forward his predecessor's legacy. Helen stays for a few more minutes, just being present in the place that meant so much to her husband. Then, carefully protecting the photograph from the rain, she walks slowly back toward the street. As she reaches the edge of the palace grounds, Helen turns around one more time. She sees Daniel standing there, strong and proud, just like Michael used to stand. She knows that the tradition will continue, that the honor Michael felt will be passed on to new generations of guards. Daniel watches her leave, feeling more connected to his job than ever before. He realizes that he's not just standing guard over a building or following ceremonial traditions. He's part of a family that extends far beyond the walls of the palace. A family that includes everyone who has ever worn this uniform and everyone who has loved them. The rain begins to lighten, and the clouds start to break apart. As the sun appears through the gray sky, Daniel stands a little straighter, knowing that he carries not just his own pride, but the memory of every guard who came before him, including a man named Michael, who served with honor and was loved deeply by a woman named Helen. That evening, Daniel goes home and calls his own wife. For the first time, he tries to explain what his job really means, why it's more than just standing still in a fancy uniform. He tells her about Helen, about the photograph, about the moment when duty and compassion met in the rain outside Buckingham Palace. And in Manchester, Helen sits in her kitchen looking at Michael's photograph. For the first time since his death, she's smiling, because today she felt him with her. Today she knew that his service mattered, and that his memory lives on in the hearts of the soldiers who continue his mission. It's a busy Saturday afternoon at Buckingham Palace, and the crowds are thicker than usual. Families from all over the world have come to see the famous guards, take pictures, and experience a piece of British history. The atmosphere is lively, with children laughing, tour guides explaining the significance of the ceremony, and cameras clicking constantly. Standing at his post near the palace entrance, Marcus feels the energy of the crowd around him. He's been a Queen's Guard for 3 years, and he's gotten used to the constant attention, but today feels special somehow, like the air itself is charged with excitement and anticipation. The weekend crowds always bring a different energy than weekday visitors. There are more families, more children, and more people who have saved up for months to make this trip to London. Marcus can see the wonder in their eyes as they look at him and his fellow guards, and it reminds him why he chose this path of service. Around 2 o'clock, something unexpected happens. A street musician sets up his case about 50 feet from the palace gates just outside the restricted area. He's an older man with silver hair and gentle eyes, carrying a violin that looks like it has seen many years of careful use. The musician's name is Peter, though the guards don't know this yet. He's been playing violin on London streets for over 20 years, not because he needs the money, but because he believes music has the power to bring people together and heal broken hearts. Peter begins to play, and the first notes that float through the air are hauntingly beautiful. He's chosen Amazing Grace, a song that seems to speak to people from all walks of life, regardless of their background or beliefs. The melody rises above the chatter of the crowd and seems to wrap around everyone present. Marcus feels the music wash over him, and despite his training to remain focused and unmoved, he finds himself deeply affected by the beauty of the sound. There's something about live music, especially played with such skill and emotion, that touches the soul in ways that recorded music cannot. The crowd begins to notice the music too. Conversations grow quieter as people turn to listen. Children stop running around and stand still, captivated by the melody. Even the most hurried tourists pause in their picture-taking to appreciate the moment. Among the crowd stands an elderly Irish woman named Bridget. She's visiting London with her daughter, But this trip has a deeper purpose than simple tourism. Bridget's son Patrick served in the British Army for 12 years, including 2 difficult tours in Northern Ireland during the Troubles of the 1980s. Patrick never came home from his second tour. He was killed by a roadside bomb while helping to evacuate civilians from a dangerous area. He died a hero. But that knowledge doesn't make the loss any easier for a mother who still grieves for her boy 35 years later. Bridget has come to London to visit the memorial wall where Patrick's name is engraved, but she wanted to stop at the palace first. Patrick always talked about visiting Buckingham Palace when he got out of the army. He wanted to see the Queen's Guard and pay his respects to fellow soldiers who served in a different but equally important way. As Peter's violin continues to weave its magic through the air, Bridget finds herself overwhelmed with memories of her son. Patrick used to sing Amazing Grace when he was nervous or scared. It was the song they sang at his funeral, and hearing it now brings back all the love and loss she carries in her heart. Without really thinking about it, Bridget begins to sing along with the violin. Her voice is soft at first, shaky with emotion, but beautiful in its honesty. She sings the words that have comforted her through decades of grief. Amazing Grace. How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Marcus hears her voice rising above the crowd, and something inside him stirs. He can hear the pain in her singing, but also the strength. This is a woman who has endured something terrible and found a way to keep going, to keep believing in grace and hope despite her loss. Other people in the crowd begin to notice Bridget's singing. Some join in quietly, humming along or singing softly. The moment becomes something larger than any one person's grief. It becomes a shared experience of human emotion and connection. Marcus knows he should keep his eyes forward, his face expressionless. But the combination of the violin and Bridget's heartfelt singing is breaking through every barrier his training has built. He finds himself thinking about his own family, his own reasons for serving, and the sacrifices that soldiers and their families make. Peter, the violin player, notices Bridget singing and adjusts his playing to support her voice. He plays softer when she needs to breathe, stronger when her voice grows confident. It's as if they're performing together, united by the universal language of music and shared human experience. Bridget's daughter stands beside her mother, tears streaming down her face as she watches this moment unfold. She's never heard her mother sing Amazing Grace since Patrick's funeral, and seeing her find the strength to do it here, in this place that meant so much to her son, is deeply moving. As the song continues, Marcus makes a decision that could cost him his position. Very quietly, so quietly that only those closest to him might hear, he begins to hum along with the melody. It's barely audible, more of a vibration in his chest than an actual sound, but it's there. The humming spreads to other guards nearby. Not loudly, not obviously, but like a gentle current running through their ranks. They're still standing at attention, still maintaining their professional appearance, but they're sharing in this moment of human connection. Bridget senses what's happening, though she can't quite believe it. These famous guards, these symbols of British tradition and discipline, are somehow participating in her song for Patrick. It's as if her son's spirit has found a way to connect with his fellow soldiers. Even across the divide between life and death, the song builds to its final verse, and Bridget's voice grows stronger. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. As the last notes fade away, the entire area falls into a respectful silence. Peter lowers his violin and nods toward Bridget in acknowledgement of her beautiful contribution. The crowd remains quiet, as if everyone understands that they've just witnessed something sacred. Marcus feels changed by the experience. He's learned that his duty isn't just about following rules and maintaining discipline. Sometimes it's about recognizing the shared humanity that connects all people, soldiers and civilians alike, in moments of joy and sorrow. Bridget wipes the tears from her eyes and looks toward the guards one more time. She can't be sure, but she thinks she sees a slight nod from Marcus. Not enough to break protocol, but enough to let her know that her song was heard and appreciated. As the crowd slowly returns to its normal activity, Bridget and her daughter prepare to leave. But before they go, Bridget speaks quietly to her daughter. Patrick would have loved this. He always said that music and military service both come from the same place, the desire to serve something bigger than yourself, to bring people together, to make the world a little bit better. Peter packs up his violin, satisfied that his music has served its purpose today. He's brought strangers together, provided comfort to a grieving mother, and reminded everyone present that beauty and connection can emerge even in the most formal and structured settings. Marcus continues his watch, but something inside him has shifted. He understands now that the most powerful moments of his service might not be the grand ceremonies or official events. They might be quiet moments like this one, when music and human emotion break through the barriers that usually separate people. As the afternoon sun begins to set over London, casting golden light on the palace walls, Marcus stands a little differently than he did that morning. He's still a professional soldier doing his duty, but he's also a human being who has been touched by the power of music to heal, to connect, and to remind us all of what truly matters. And somewhere in the evening air above Buckingham Palace, the echo of Amazing Grace seems to linger, carrying with it the love of a mother for her lost son, and the respect of fellow soldiers who understand the price of service. Today is different at Buckingham Palace. There's an excitement in the air that goes beyond the usual tourist activity. A foreign leader is visiting, which means extra security, larger crowds, and the kind of formal ceremony that makes the Queen's Guard feel the full weight of their responsibility. Standing at his position near the main courtyard, Jonathan feels the importance of the day. He's been a guardsman for 2.5 years, and state visits always bring out the best in the ceremony. The uniforms are pressed to perfection, the marching is flawless, and every detail has been rehearsed until it's second nature. But what makes today truly special isn't just the official ceremony. It's the diverse crowd that has gathered to witness this moment of international friendship. Among the usual tourists are groups of people who have a deeper connection to what this day represents. Near the front of the crowd stands a family that catches Jonathan's attention, though he keeps his eyes forward as his training demands. It's a father with his young son, and they're speaking quietly in Arabic. The father is pointing at the guards and explaining something to the boy, who nods seriously as he listens. The father's name is Ahmed, though Jonathan doesn't know this yet. Ahmed arrived in Britain 15 years ago as a refugee, fleeing a war that had torn his homeland apart. He came with nothing but hope for a better life and the determination to build a future for his family in a place where they could live in peace. The journey to Britain wasn't easy. Ahmed spent months in refugee camps learning English, waiting for paperwork to be processed, and wondering if he would ever have a real home again. But Britain welcomed him, gave him a chance to start over, and eventually granted him citizenship. Now Ahmed owns a small restaurant in Birmingham, employs 6 people, and has raised his son Yusuf to be proud of both his heritage and his British identity. Today's state visit has special meaning for Ahmed because it represents the kind of international cooperation and mutual respect that made his new life possible. "Do you see those soldiers, Yusuf?" Ahmed says to his 8-year-old son in English, because they always speak English when they're out in public. They represent something very important. They show that this country welcomes people from all over the world and protects everyone equally. Yusuf looks up at Jonathan and the other guards with wide, curious eyes. "Why are they so still, Baba?" Ahmed smiles at his son's question. "Because their job is very serious. They protect not just the Queen, but the idea that everyone deserves to live in safety and peace. That's why we can stand here today, feeling safe and welcome." Jonathan can hear parts of their conversation, and something about the father's tone touches him. There's a deep gratitude in Ahmed's voice, appreciation for things that many people take for granted. Jonathan recognizes it because he's heard it before from other immigrants and refugees who understand the true value of freedom and security. As the ceremony begins, Ahmed lifts Yusuf onto his shoulders so the boy can see better. Ahmed is thinking about his own father, who died in the war that forced Ahmed to flee. His father never got to see his grandson, never got to know the peace and prosperity that Ahmed has found in Britain. "I wish your grandfather could see this," Ahmed whispers to Yusuf. He would be so proud to know that his grandson is growing up in a place where soldiers protect peace instead of fighting wars. Yusuf doesn't fully understand the weight of his father's words yet, but he senses their importance. He watches the guards with the serious attention that children reserve for things they know are significant. The state ceremony proceeds with its usual precision. Bands play, officials make speeches, and the guards perform their duties with the excellence that has made them famous around the world. But for Ahmed, the most meaningful part isn't the pageantry, it's what it represents. After the official ceremony ends, most of the crowd begins to disperse. But Ahmed and Yusuf stay behind. And Ahmed walks closer to where Jonathan is standing. He wants his son to see the guards up close, to understand the human faces behind the uniforms. These soldiers, Ahmed tells Yusuf, speaking loud enough for Jonathan to hear, they do more than just stand here looking important. They represent the promise that this country made to us when we arrived. The promise that we would be protected, that we would belong, that we could build a life here in safety. Ahmed pauses, looking directly at Jonathan even though he knows the guard can't respond. When I first came to Britain, I was scared and alone. I didn't speak the language well, and I didn't know if I would ever truly belong here. But seeing soldiers like these, knowing that they serve everyone equally regardless of where they come from, gave me hope. Jonathan feels something stirring in his chest. He's never thought about his role in quite this way before. To him, being a Queen's Guard has always been about tradition, ceremony, and national pride. But hearing Ahmed's words, he realizes that his uniform represents something even more important. The promise of inclusion and protection for all people who call Britain home. Yusuf tugs on his father's sleeve. Baba, can I say thank you to the soldier? Ahmed nods. Of course, my son. But remember, he can't answer you while he's working, but he can hear you, and he will understand. Yusuf takes a step closer to Jonathan and speaks in his clear young voice. Thank you, Mr. Soldier, for keeping us safe. My Baba says you protect everyone, even people like us who came from far away. That makes me feel happy and safe. Jonathan's heart swells with emotion. This child, born to refugee parents, sees him not as a foreign symbol or a tourist attraction, but as a protector and guardian. The innocence and gratitude in Yusuf's voice cuts through every barrier that training and protocol have built. Ahmed places his hand on his son's shoulder and adds, Thank you for serving everyone equally. Thank you for representing a country that gave us a second chance at life. At that moment, Jonathan makes a decision that comes straight from his heart. Very slowly, very carefully, he shifts his gaze just enough to make eye contact with Ahmed. In that look, he tries to convey everything he cannot say in words: recognition, respect, and the understanding that Ahmed and his family belong here just as much as anyone else. Ahmed sees the look and understands immediately. His eyes fill with tears of gratitude. In his homeland, soldiers were often figures of fear. But here, this soldier has just acknowledged him as an equal, as a fellow citizen worthy of respect and protection. You see, Yusuf, Ahmed says softly, this is what it means to belong somewhere. When the people whose job it is to protect the country recognize you as part of that country. Other people in the remaining crowd notice the interaction. Some smile, understanding that they're witnessing a beautiful moment of connection. A few other immigrants and refugees in the crowd feel their own emotions stirring, remembering their own journeys to British citizenship. As Ahmed and Yusuf prepare to leave, Ahmed makes a small bow toward Jonathan. Not a formal gesture, but a simple sign of respect between two men who serve their community in different ways. Jonathan returns to his regulation stance, but something inside him has changed forever. He understands now that his uniform doesn't just represent British tradition or royal ceremony. It represents the promise that Britain makes to all its people, that everyone who chooses to build their life here will be protected and valued. For the rest of his shift, Jonathan thinks about Ahmed and Yusuf. He thinks about the courage it must have taken to leave everything behind and start over in a new country. He thinks about the gratitude that Ahmed expressed, and how it reminded him of the true purpose of his service. That evening, when Jonathan goes home to his own family, he tells them about the refugee father and his son. He talks about how seeing his country through their eyes helped him understand his job in a new way. I'm not just guarding a building or following traditions, he tells his wife. I'm representing the promise that Britain makes to everyone who calls this place home. I'm showing the world that we welcome people from everywhere and protect them all equally. And in Birmingham, Ahmed tucks Yusuf into bed and tells him one more story about their day at the palace. Remember how the soldier looked at us, Yusuf? That look said, you belong here. That's something you should never forget. This is your country too, and those soldiers protect you just as much as they protect everyone else. Yusuf falls asleep thinking about the tall soldier in the red uniform, and how good it felt to know that someone so important was watching over him and his family, And in that child's dreams, the world is a place where everyone belongs, everyone is protected, and soldiers stand guard not to keep people apart, but to keep them safe together. The morning air at Buckingham Palace carries the crisp feeling of early autumn. Leaves are beginning to turn gold and red in the nearby parks, and there's something peaceful about London during this time of year. The summer crowds have thinned out a bit, making way for a more relaxed atmosphere around the palace gates. Standing at his post near the main entrance, Christopher enjoys these quieter periods when he can really observe the people who come to visit. He's been a Queen's Guard for just over a year, and he's learned to appreciate the different types of visitors who make the journey to see them. Around mid-morning, Christopher notices an elderly woman settling onto a small folding stool about 30 feet from his position. She's carrying what looks like an artist's bag, and she moves with the careful precision of someone who has done this many times before. The woman's name is Dorothy, though Christopher doesn't know this yet. She's 78 years old, and she's been sketching and painting in London for over 50 years. Dorothy has a special connection to military subjects. Her late husband served in the Royal Air Force, and she's spent decades capturing the dignity and honor of British service members in her artwork. Dorothy sets up her easel with practiced ease. Despite the slight tremor in her hands that comes with age, she pulls out a well-worn sketch pad and arranges her pencils in the order she's used for decades. Everything about her movement speaks of an artist who has perfected her craft over a lifetime of dedication. What makes Dorothy's story particularly remarkable is something that happened to her during World War II. She was just a young girl during the London Blitz, living with her family in the East End. One night, during a particularly heavy bombing raid, shrapnel from an anti-aircraft shell struck near their shelter. A piece of metal damaged her left eye, leaving her with partial vision that would affect her for the rest of her life. But Dorothy never let her injury stop her from pursuing her passion for art. She adapted her technique, learned to work with limited depth perception, and developed a unique style that captured not just what things looked like, but how they felt. Her paintings of British service members have been displayed in galleries across the country, and she's donated many pieces to military museums and veteran organizations. Today, Dorothy has come to sketch the Queen's Guard because she's working on a special project. It's a series of portraits honoring different branches of British military service, and she wants to capture the quiet dignity of the guards who represent centuries of tradition and honor. Dorothy begins to sketch, her pencil moving across the paper with confident strokes despite the slight shake in her hands. She's drawn from life thousands of times, and she knows how to work quickly to capture the essence of her subject before anything changes. Christopher can see her working from the corner of his eye, and he's impressed by her focus and skill. Even from his distance, he can tell that she's creating something beautiful. There's something deeply respectful about the way she observes him and his fellow guards, as if she's trying to see past the uniform to the person underneath. As Dorothy works, she's thinking about all the young men and women she's sketched over the years. Pilots preparing for dangerous missions, soldiers returning from overseas deployments, sailors preparing to leave port. Each drawing has been her way of honoring their service and preserving a moment of their dedication for future generations. About an hour into her work, something unexpected happens. Dorothy reaches for a particular pencil that she needs for shading, but her trembling hand knocks it off her easel. The pencil rolls several feet away, coming to rest closer to Christopher's position. Dorothy looks at the pencil with frustration. At her age, getting up and down repeatedly is becoming more difficult, and she needs that specific pencil to complete the detail work she's planning. She considers asking a passerby for help, but most people seem to be focused on taking pictures or hurrying to their next destination. Christopher sees what has happened, and he faces a dilemma that goes to the heart of what it means to be a guardsman. His training is absolutely clear. He must remain motionless at his post regardless of what happens around him. Breaking position could result in serious disciplinary action, but Christopher also sees an elderly woman who has clearly dedicated significant time and effort to creating art that honors soldiers like himself. He can see the quality of her work even from his position, and he understands that she's not just sketching for her own entertainment. She's creating something meaningful, something that respects and celebrates military service. For several minutes, Christopher watches as Dorothy considers her options. She looks at the pencil, then at her sketch, then back at the pencil. He can see her weighing whether the drawing is worth the physical difficulty of retrieving the tool she needs. Finally, Dorothy begins to slowly stand up from her stool, preparing to walk over and pick up her pencil. Her movements are careful and deliberate, and Christopher can see that this simple task is more challenging for her than it should be. That's when Christopher makes a decision that surprises even him. Very slowly, very carefully, he takes a single step forward, just enough to reach the pencil with his foot. Then, with a movement so subtle that most people wouldn't notice it, he gently kicks the pencil back toward Dorothy's easel. Dorothy sees what has happened, and for a moment she's not sure she can believe it. This famous guard, this symbol of British military tradition, has just broken protocol to help her with her art. She looks up at Christopher with tears forming in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispers, though she's not sure if he can hear her. "That was very kind." Christopher returns to his exact position, his face maintaining its professional expression. But inside he feels a warmth that has nothing to do with the autumn sun. He's just learned that sometimes the most important part of serving others isn't following every rule perfectly, and it's recognizing when a small act of kindness matters more than strict adherence to protocol. Dorothy picks up her pencil and continues working, but now her sketch has an extra dimension. She's not just drawing a guard anymore. She's drawing a human being who showed compassion and respect for an elderly artist. Her pencil strokes become more confident, more inspired. A few other people in the area notice what happened, and there's a quiet ripple of appreciation through the small crowd. They've just witnessed something beautiful, a moment when duty and kindness work together instead of in opposition. Dorothy works for another hour, adding details and shading that bring her sketch to life. When she's finished, she has created something remarkable, a portrait that captures not just the formal dignity of the Queen's Guard, but the humanity and compassion that lies beneath the ceremonial surface. Before she leaves, Dorothy does something that surprises the few remaining onlookers. She tears the finished sketch from her pad, walks as close to Christopher as the barriers allow, and carefully places the drawing where he can see it. "This is for you," she says clearly. "Thank you for reminding an old artist that kindness and duty can exist together. Your service honors not just your uniform, but the best of what it means to be human." Christopher can see the sketch now, and he's amazed by what Dorothy has captured. It's not just a technical drawing. It's a work of art that shows him as both a soldier and a compassionate person. She somehow managed to convey strength and gentleness in the same image. Dorothy packs up her supplies and prepares to leave, but she turns back one more time to look at Christopher. "I've been drawing soldiers for 50 years, she says, and the best ones have always been those who understood that true strength includes kindness." As Dorothy walks away, Christopher feels changed by the encounter. He's learned that his job isn't just about maintaining discipline and following orders. It's about representing the best qualities of military service, not just strength and courage, but also compassion and humanity. That evening, when Christopher's shift ends, he carefully collects Dorothy's sketch. It becomes one of his most treasured possessions, a reminder that even in the most formal and structured environments, there are opportunities to show kindness and make human connections. Christopher frames the sketch and hangs it in his apartment, where it serves as a daily reminder of an elderly artist who taught him that the most powerful acts of service often happen in quiet moments when nobody is watching except for someone who truly understands the value of both art and compassion. And in her studio across London, Dorothy adds Christopher's portrait to her collection of military subjects. But this one is special, because it captures not just a soldier doing his duty, but a human being who chose kindness when kindness mattered most. The day is coming to an end at Buckingham Palace, and the golden light of late afternoon casts long shadows across the courtyard. The crowds have thinned out as evening approaches, leaving behind a peaceful quiet that feels different from the busy energy of midday. Standing at his post for the final hour of his shift, James reflects on everything that has happened today. He's been a Queen's Guard for 3 years now, but today has been unlike any other. Today he's learned something that will change how he thinks about his service forever. James has witnessed moments throughout the day that have touched him deeply. He's seen fellow guards break protocol in small but meaningful ways to show compassion and respect for the people who visit the palace. Each incident has added another layer to his understanding of what it truly means to serve. He thinks about the little girl from Wales who traveled so far just to see the red soldiers from her storybooks. He remembers the elderly veteran who struggled to salute despite his arthritis, and the guard who returned that salute with perfect military precision. He recalls the widow who stood in the rain, holding a photograph of her late husband who once wore the same uniform James now wears. These memories swirl in James's mind as he prepares for the end of his watch. He's beginning to understand that his job is about much more than ceremony and tradition. It's about being a living symbol of something that people need to believe in: honor, service,
and the idea that there are still people willing to dedicate their lives to protecting others. As the sun begins to set,
painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, James notices an older gentleman approaching the palace gates. The man walks slowly, with the careful steps of someone who has lived a long life and seen many changes in the world. The gentleman stops near the gates and simply stands there, looking at James and the other guards with an expression of deep respect. He doesn't take pictures or try to get their attention. He just observes quietly, as if he's absorbing something important from the moment. James can see that this man understands something that many visitors miss. He sees past the colorful uniforms and ceremonial weapons to the deeper meaning of what the guards represent. His presence feels different from typical tourists, more thoughtful, more reverent. After several minutes of quiet observation, the gentleman does something unexpected. He removes his hat and holds it over his heart, then stands perfectly still in his own form of attention. It's not a military salute, but it's clearly a gesture of respect and gratitude. James feels moved by this simple act. Here is someone who recognizes the sacrifice and dedication that military service requires, even in peacetime. Someone who understands that standing guard is not just about protecting a building, but about maintaining values and traditions that connect the past to the future. The gentleman maintains his respectful stance for nearly a minute, then gently places his hat back on his head. Before leaving, he nods slightly toward James, not expecting a response, but simply acknowledging the shared understanding between them. As the man walks away, James thinks about all the encounters he's witnessed today. Each one has taught him something different about the impact of his service. The little girl showed him the power of wonder and joy. The veteran taught him about the bonds between soldiers across generations. The grieving widow reminded him that service affects entire families, not just those who wear the uniform. The refugee father and his son showed James that his uniform represents hope and belonging for people who have found safety in Britain. The elderly artist demonstrated that service inspires others to create beauty and preserve important moments in history, and now this final visitor has reminded him that quiet respect and gratitude still exist in the world. As the changing of the guard ceremony approaches, James prepares to hand over his post to the evening shift. But he knows he'll carry the lessons of this day with him long after he takes off his uniform. The ceremony proceeds with its usual precision. Commands are given, formations are executed perfectly, and the transition from day to evening guard happens without a single mistake. To the remaining tourists, it's an impressive display of military discipline and tradition. But for James, the ceremony means something deeper now. He's not just participating in a routine changing of shifts. He's passing on a responsibility that extends far beyond following orders or maintaining protocol. He's handing over the duty to represent the best of what military service can be, not just strength and discipline, but also compassion, respect, and humanity. As James marches away from his post, he thinks about the journal he keeps at home. Tonight he'll write about the encounters he witnessed today. He'll try to capture the feeling of seeing his fellow guards choose kindness over strict rule following, when kindness mattered more. Back in his apartment that evening, James sits at his small desk and begins to write. The words come easily because the day has been so meaningful. Today I learned that being a Queen's Guard is about more than I ever imagined. We're not just ceremonial soldiers or tourist attractions. We're human symbols of something that people need to believe in. The idea that there are still people willing to serve others, to protect what matters, and to show compassion even when no one is watching. I saw guards break small rules today to show kindness to a child, respect to a veteran, acknowledgement to a grieving widow, and acceptance to a refugee family. Each time they risked disciplinary action to do what their hearts told them was right. And each time they made our uniform mean something more than just tradition and ceremony. I used to think that being a perfect guard meant following every rule exactly. Never moving, never reacting, never showing emotion. But today I learned that being a perfect guard means understanding when the spirit of service is more important than the letter of the law. The people who visit us don't just want to see statues in red uniforms. They want to see evidence that honor, courage, and compassion still exist in the world. They want to believe that there are people who dedicate their lives to protecting others and preserving what's good in society. Tomorrow, I'll put on this uniform again. I'll march to my post and stand perfectly still for hours. But now I understand that my real job isn't just to guard a building or follow ceremonial traditions. My job is to be a living reminder that service, sacrifice, and human kindness are still alive in the world. James closes his journal and prepares for bed, but his mind is still active with thoughts about the day. He thinks about the responsibility he carries, not just to the crown or to military tradition, but to every person who looks at him and sees hope, protection, or inspiration. He realizes that every guardsman before him faced the same choice between rigid rule-following and compassionate humanity. The best of them found ways to honor both, to serve with perfect discipline while never forgetting the human heart that beats beneath the uniform. As James falls asleep, he's already looking forward to tomorrow, not because he expects more dramatic moments or rule-breaking incidents, but because he now understands that every day of service is an opportunity to represent something meaningful to someone who needs to see it. The next morning, James will wake up and put on his red uniform with renewed purpose. He'll march to his post knowing that he's not just a guard, he's a keeper of hope, a protector of values, and a reminder that even in a world that often seems harsh and uncaring, there are still people willing to serve others with both strength and compassion. And in the days and years to come, James will find his own moments to show kindness while maintaining honor, to break small rules in service of larger truths, and to prove that the greatest strength of the Queen's Guard lies not in their ability to stand perfectly still, but in their capacity to remain perfectly human while doing their duty. The cycle continues as it has for generations. Each guard learns from those who came before, and each teaches something to those who will follow. And through it all, the true mission remains the same, to serve not just with discipline and tradition, but with the understanding that real honor comes from treating every person with dignity, respect, and compassion. The sun sets over Buckingham Palace, ending another day of service. But the lessons learned and the connections made will live on, carried forward by guards who understand that their greatest duty is not just to protect a place, but to protect the idea that service, sacrifice, and human kindness will always matter in the world.